good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you all for joining us from whatever part of the world you may be at. I'm Lucian Fogoros, I'm your co-founder, and I'd like to kick off IoT World's Manufacturing Day, welcoming you, letting you know that if you like a comment, please do post that either on LinkedIn or X or your favorite social channels or right here in the chat. We also would like to remind you that on September 10, we have AI in Manufacturing, the AI Frontier, and we'll love to pick your brain, ask you folks who else you'd like to see speaking at our event. With that, I'd like to start the first session sponsored by IoT World and introduce the moderator, which is a VC, an entrepreneur, and a former WEF, World Economic Forum executive, Maya Ben-Dror. Maya, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Lucian. Very pleased to be joined by amazing CEOs and founders right here that are at the edge of innovation for manufacturing. I'll start by introducing them, and then we're going to hit it off with some nice questions. I'll start by introducing Katie, who is the co-founder and CEO of Lucid. Katie is a master's in material science and engineering and a PhD in solid state materials chemistry. She has worked in industrial materials manufacturing for over a decade as both a process engineer and then operations management, as well as global R&D engineering management. So she used her deep expertise and science-based knowledge to create a software platform for materials manufacturing processes. And she is an adjunct professor for material science and engineering at Case Western Reserve University. And our second lady here on the call, Julia, co-founder and CEO of Rethink Robotics. Julia has recently awarded one of 10 women shaping the future of robotics by International Federation Robotics. So congratulations for that, Julia. And she joins us with over 10 years of experience in industrial automation. She applies her research in material science and develops scale automated robotics. And last but not least, our male colleague here on this panel, and that's Dan. Dan co-founded and is the CEO of Digit. A company building a modern operating system for manufacturing, so quite a new angle here, bringing production, inventory, and operations into one connected platform. And before he founded Digit, he spent nearly a decade as a consultant leading digital transformation initiatives for dozens of manufacturing companies across the US, from small to mid-size to Fortune 500. So he knows the pain, the problem. He also served as CEO of a manufacturing company where he grew revenue fivefold, so has some good founding experience there. So without further ado, let me get us started with defining the problem at hand. Julia, starting with you, what do you think is the biggest challenge manufacturing companies face when they start their automation process?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me here on this panel today. It's an absolute pleasure to contribute to the discussion. From what I see today is there has been a long time of manufacturers of robots and components, and they have been pushing their innovation, and users were not really sure what works and what does not work. Also, there is a wide area of technology which has been established, which has been deployed in the field, which has been proven to work, where there is also, on the other hand, a lot of new startups which are still testing their products in the field. And I'm not saying that this is something wrong. It's actually great, and we need these innovations, we need these tests, but it really has an impact on how manufacturing companies choose their automation strategy and what are their preferred vendors and how they go and apply the automation in their fields. So that is what I see. I think a lot of people are looking for the right partners to actually define their automation strategy in the long term. And that includes not just the hardware and the integration, but also a lot of software, which can then define the overall workflows.
Yeah, and that's, when we think about robotics, Julia, right, it's build versus buy. And I think the buy incentive here is much bigger, and that experimentation and learning by doing with innovators is probably key to the journey and the learning. And with that, I'm turning over to Katie, because you come from a different space, right? When you think about materials, when you're looking at your customers, what are the broader markets that you're serving, and what are the issues that they're challenged with when they want to go about new materials integration?
Yeah, so I'm looking at material manufacturers of high-tech materials, including alloys, ceramics, the single crystals that go into high-powered lasers, the semiconductors that become the substrates for chip spin. And so these are inherently very complex materials, and they have a need to be very precise. And so this manufacturing is inherently very hard. It relies on deep industry know-how and empirical knowledge to control these continuous processes. They involve a lot of complex physical phenomena, and defects are common, and therefore yield is very challenging to get a high yield in this manufacturing space. And it can be unpredictable. So this industry is often referred to as an art rather than a science. So it's a challenging manufacturing process. And today these manufacturers are facing compounding challenges. We have a supply chain in turmoil, spikes in demands, higher technology is increasing the specifications for these materials. We have increased competition and a diminishing workforce. So the way that the industry has been functioning, relying on this deep industry know-how, is being challenged on many fronts. So there's a need for technical innovation, a need to do things differently today.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Actually, there is a study that shows that 34% shortage in skilled labor in that space is one of the main barriers for success. And when you think about manufacturers, shifting 60% of them actually shifting to just-in-time practices, that is not helpful when you think about long-term transformations. Exactly. So there is kind of a dual challenge here that we're looking at. Yeah, that's great. So turning over to you, Dan. So how many digital transformation or smart manufacturing initiatives fail to go live in your experience and deliver the results that they were promised?
Yeah, from my experience, I would say over 50%. There are dozens of reasons for this. I think the top 5 that I've seen personally are these companies don't know where to start. So like Julia said, there's a very robust ecosystem out there. There's so many choices for different things, even just categorizing what does this actually mean? Robotics, ERP, IoT. Where do we start? Who do we partner with? How can we get it set up? A lot of the cost structure for this has come down, so it's more accessible in that regard, but figuring out where they want to actually enter in has been a challenge for these companies. I think no clear business case is also something we've seen. So the projects are often tech-driven. People like the shiny things, the new things. They hear the big data. 10 years ago, now they hear IoT. Now they hear AI. And so they're rushing to implement these things, but they don't have a clear ROI goal, like reducing scrap, improve lead times, or increase throughput for their organization. They a lot of times have overly ambitious scopes. So I've seen this so many times where companies will try to overhaul everything at once. And what we see is it delays real learning of trying to do it incrementally and seeing what works and what doesn't. And this boiling the ocean often leads to burnout and management teams that kind of get frustrated and give up on the project after a year or 2 years. Change management's a big one. If initiatives are driven top down and you don't have the buy-in from the shop floor, that's kind of a recipe for failure. And then I think the biggest core thing that I've seen, and a big reason why I'm doing what I'm doing now with Digit, is a disconnected tech stack, and being able to provide a connected tech stack, especially one that non-technical users can set up and manage. So being able to tie in all the data from the ERPs, from the PLC on the machines, from spreadsheets, whatever that is, being able to connect that hardware and software quickly and easily and know how to use it with a single interface that they can maintain and manage over time. I think those are the key things that without those, you see a lot of these things fail.
I read a Capgemini Research Institute piece recently that was citing cultural resistance is responsible for over 50% of failed deployments. So that piece of cross-functional buy-in within the organization, you're mentioning, shop floor just not being prepared for the transition, seems to be a big pain point. Also, like what you said about, how, we're trying to do too much in too little time, or without having enough understanding, enough KPIs, enough evaluation or scale-up plans. So a lot of problems there that you guys have covered. Let's move to what are the solutions and the opportunities we're seeing before we move into, how do we overcome trade-offs and how do we actually help the rubber hit the ground. So Julia, back to you. When we think about how AI can help manufacturers overcome challenges, how would you, what are the 2-3 things that you see as the opportunities in the next year or two?
for the AI part. So I think there is a big misunderstanding still from the user perspective. I visited Automate Show last week in Detroit, and there are still a lot of people who focus on the manipulator or on the AGV or on the AMR. And for them, it's like, let's talk to the big players and see what can they offer. But I also think that we need to shift, and there are already a few people who notice that, and that it is more than just the robots. It is also the ecosystem, the periphery around it. It's a lot about sensors, because when we think about analytic AI, we need all the information, and very few information can actually be captured by the robots itself. It's the sensors, it's vision, it's force torque, it's audio, it's so much. There can be thermal sensors. There is a huge range, and I think the next big trend is sensors, because we need them all to gather the information, and this will be the trend, because only by capturing relevant and reliable data we are able to learn and make the predictions that we need. So this is, I think, one of the biggest trends that I see right now, and I see that there is a perception in the market, and there will be a big market for that in the next few weeks and months, where we see a huge demand for that.
Great. So we have to gather the data, the insight, create, that platform of information, the opposite of information scarcity, that we're actually able to deploy AI in a smart way instead of, putting the carriage in front of the horses.
Correct.
Yes. Yeah, fantastic. And Katie, I didn't often hear that, because I think some take it for granted that sensors exist, and this is kind of a given. And the investment in infrastructure is mainly in the software part. Do we have the right software? Are we able to integrate data? Are we able to do that infrastructure first before we even think about AI, without really thinking of the improvements on the hardware side and software side on the sensors themselves? Katie, when you think about your industry, your field, how does software and AI come to play?
Yeah, so a lot of what Dan and Julia are saying is very true, that sensors and data are critical. A lot of material manufacturers have a lot of data, and they might not be able to integrate it. So I do think we're at the point in material manufacturing where there might be some level of automation, but it might be an issue of integrating the data, integrating the outputs with the input data, with the parameters that are controlled during the processes. And this is where software comes in. This is where you're integrating different types of data, you're adding data, and some manufacturers might need added sensors, they might need added infrastructure, but many are already controlling a lot of parameters within the system. So it's a matter of integrating those parameters within a software platform.
Yeah. And I guess that we're all familiar with the preventional items, so we can actually do a lot of prevention care and control better our entire value chain, and therefore get more efficiency if we're able to see things and model things and detect where we need to intervene ahead of time, and that's critical for manufacturing. And with that, I toss over to you, Dane. If you have anything to add to that from your standpoint, where do you see the 2-3 opportunities ahead, especially in regards to AI and software?
Yeah, I mean, Julia and Katie nailed it right on the head. I heard ecosystem, I heard platform, and I think that's it. And the tie-in between hardware and software, I think, is reaching a new position that we haven't really had access to in the past, unless you've been in kind of a technical innovation lab or something like that, where this stuff is becoming more mainstream. Sensors, I could not agree more, Julia, with you. I think that is the next big wave. Like you mentioned, sensors can measure everything, even moisture in the air. And the ability to really get the full advantage of AI, I think, is twofold. One, you have to get the data onto a single ecosystem, and you get that from the sensors. You can also get qualitative data through user input and things like that. But what you do with that data, aggregating it, in our opinion, is not enough. You have to put it together. AI can very easily make sense of it. The models are getting very, very good. For us, it's how are you leveraging that AI to be proactive and tell operators, tell manufacturers what it is they need to be focused on and what they need to be doing based on that data, instead of the old model that we've seen over the last many decades, where I'm coming in and I'm pulling something. I have to go look for something and find. I want the AI to come in, aggregate that data, and push it to me so that I come in every day and it just tells me what I need to focus on in short, medium, and long term. And there's broad applications across, shop floor, supply chain, logistics, 3PL, I mean, you name it. And then the other things that I think software specifically can help with, and even hardware a little bit, that's really underlooked, is the human-centered design. The UI and the UX really, really matters, because you look at, in the space I'm in with ERP, you look at most ERPs and you look at a screenshot and it's just overwhelming. Looks like it was created in the 90s. You look at a lot of the hardware components and they're very technical, right? It's like, if you built radios as a kid, you can get these, but most people can't. So that human-centered design piece, taking a lot of that, that UI, that UX, things where you can take complex hardware and it be plug and play for a user, like they're setting up a Ring doorbell. If you can bring that to manufacturing, that's huge. And on the software side, we're now dealing with more and more folks who grew up with iPhones and really good design. Bringing that into business software, manufacturing software, I think is also a big opportunity.
Yeah, and I love that. I was, when you started talking about how you want AI to do everything for us and inform us, I was going to pop the question of, and what about the workforce? And on your last point there on things like augmented reality, right? How can we use AI systems as skill multiplier instead of replacement is the trend we're hearing about, right? About how you can, for example, shorten onboarding time for frontline workers by 40, 60%, how you can meet employees where they are culturally instead of expecting them to lock their phones when they enter manufacturing floor and be traveling in time 30 years back into ancient period. How would you all, how do you all perceive that tension between reskilling workforce? How many are we going to be able to keep there, and how would day-to-day work look like at the manufacturing floor?
I think I would love to step in here and just second what Dan was saying about this human interaction and software for humans, not instead of humans. In material manufacturing, particularly, we need this hybrid approach. It's such a technical manufacturing process that, if you have AI that's not guided by human intelligence, it will hallucinate and it will create results and suggestions that don't actually work for the process. So this human expertise is critical to guiding those machine learning and AI algorithms. And we want to create space for those technicians on the shop floor, for those engineers to make decisions faster, right? So they can be innovating, they can be thinking about different manufacturing, circular manufacturing, new materials, new processes, rather than just fight fires, where we can do that with AI and our software very quickly, right? So we need this human interaction in the AI.
Yeah, and just to comment on that, because I think this is very important when we talk about AI and user experience. I mean, the times that a manufacturing was delivering a product with a user manual, or the manufacturer of a machine delivered a machine and they did the training of the operators and there was this user manual for that, and that never changed. These times are over. Customers ask for machines that grow incrementally, step by step with what they are doing, but that requires also proper documentation. And we don't want people to search for these things. But as Dan says, there should be a pop-up in the morning. Hey, operator, you are employee number XYZ, have you seen the training for this new feature? And people are directly prompted to these new information. And this is where I can help, because it can provide new information on features in multiple languages so fast that it's available right now and not with a 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks delay. So that actually speeds up the process and it helps operator to be confident around these machines.
And I think what you're saying too is that we can then train operators faster, both on the process and the technology that's applied.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. And I think to add on to that, some of the best systems that we've seen that are emerging and are kind of on the cutting edge are systems that are so good and so powerful and are collecting all this data, but most people don't realize they're actually there. And that's huge, because you have a lot of folks that are writing stuff that you're getting that data somehow, right? It's either on paper, or some more forward-looking companies have the tablets and doing that kind of stuff. But if you can get operators, frontline managers who are closest to the action, who know more about the day-to-day or how to improve the cycle time here, if you can get them more, like we talked about, of out of the fighting fires or out of the making something up, but just coming in, doing their job, switching their mind more into kind of the Toyota production system. Toyota is very good about this. You don't come to work, you come to think, you come to improve. That's huge. And one of the biggest enablers is getting the systems to support all of that work for you, so that, Maya, it's like you said, it's an enabler, not a replacement, so that you can now focus on how do I increase that cycle time? How do I increase OEE by that extra 2%? And I think that's a big trend that we're seeing with these systems come into play, is they're easy to implement, but they're also kind of in the background in a way, which is also important.
And I think what we're talking about now is more on the vision side of things for many. When conversations I had with SMEs, they have 1-2 manufacturing plants. They're telling me that even the simplest solution is hard to integrate because they basically have one computer on the shop floor, and they don't really have the habit of going even to that computer. So there's a radical change that needs to happen in how we structure, from the physical infrastructure to the human, the culture that happens right at the floor. So when you think about the game plan, what are the few things that you probably have to avoid when you're introducing AI or software, right? We're all aware about the resistance to it and the many questions that come, and I think at least my mind, I'm thinking of Amazon manufacturing, and kind of shipping centers where you actually have humans and robots and who is actually working for who. What are the few things to avoid, for leaders to avoid, when they integrate solutions like the solutions you're talking about here?
Yeah, I think a couple of the big ones are, don't boil the ocean. So do it incrementally and have a really good plan. Start with the fundamentals first. Don't try to implement like the craziest thing that you think is going to be the magic bullet that's going to turn around the performance of the factory. Start with the culture. Start with getting buy-in. Start with educating people. Why is this important? It's not scary. This is not coming for you. This is to help you. And then educate yourself too on what does an actual integrated digital transformation strategy look like? What does that mean? What is the full scope of that? Is it robots? Is it systems? Is it vision? What is that? And then it's making sure that you are that as a leadership team, you've got full buy-in. It's going to be hard. There's going to be failures, and you need to push through those to be able to actually get the stuff implemented. So to me, it's avoid boiling the ocean, and it's avoid just forcing this on the culture, because it's going to have it's going to have a lot of resistance against it.
Yeah, and I was hearing you answering. I think the avoid question is more difficult than these three things. So feel free, Julia and Katie, to compliment by speaking positively.
Yeah, and I think, but you asked what shall we avoid? And this is, I think, fear. And fear comes from not knowing what is going on. So I think the definition of what AI means to the relevant company is important. So if we don't define what's the scope, what's the goal, and based on that we create the vision, people will not understand it. Because I think we all have some sort of experience with AI. And I recently heard a quote which said, AI will never be worse than it is today, because we're learning every day. Today it is as its worst, but tomorrow it's getting better, and in a week from now it's going to get better. Imagine like a year or 2 years ago, we all tried ChatGPT, and we tried a couple of things, they didn't work. Today, ChatGPT, I would say, is already, outdated. We are focusing on new software and new applications, but look how brilliant some pictures and visualizations that we see are. They almost look real, right? And if we project that in how this can look in 6 or 12 months from now, we really got to see there is progress. So even if we don't agree or don't like what we see today because it's not working for us, let's focus on what we want to achieve and pull the right strings together to make it work. Because I think there are so many startups, so many people working on solutions. And I think what it takes is bringing the right people together to make that work, what a company defines as a goal. We don't need to develop a universal solution that solves all the problems, but we need individual solutions which have a purpose and a meaning. So I think this is important, to define the goal and work with those who have the knowledge to get it done, and then we learn from there. So, and that is in alliance with what Dan said. It's about going one step at a time.
I love that point. And I would add to that, it's easy to see the business case for AI, for applying knowledge and making materials or making products faster or on time or with higher yield or increasing production efficiency. But what's also critical is considering all of the levels of users. So we need to provide feedback at the level of the shop floor. We need to understand what they are actually doing and tie in their expertise and not overlook the deep understanding of the folks who will be using the applications, right? So I do think that those are the people with the most insight on the processes, right? So we need to include their buy-in, not just the business strategy, not just the overall engineering vision, but at all levels of users, incorporating that intelligence into the AI.
Yeah, I love that piece of collaboration, because of bottom up as well, not just one directional. And that's probably a process based, setting up little consoles. I heard from some companies, committees that are actually not just leadership composed, but also composed from various personalities, and also our future hires, right? When you think about future hires, how are they going to look like? Who are you going to be hiring for? Also remains a question. And I wanted to ask a question that relates to some things that I devote some of my time to, and that's gender equity. Do you see any opportunity here to, tilt where we are today, and is it desirable or not? Not just for the ladies.
We'll leave it to you, Dan.
Yeah, I think there's definitely an opportunity. There are a lot of demographic shifts, I think, at play. Like in the US, you've got baby boomers who are retiring. You've got a lot of folks moving into mid-market manufacturing. You have obviously a lot with the geopolitical scene over the last couple of months that I'm sure we've all been following very closely. And what you see is you have a lot, it's a lot less old school, and it's a lot more kind of new age in terms of what are the technologies, what are the things that we can do to integrate this? And you have more people around the table, and these demographics happen all over the place, right? On a number of categories, whether it's gender, whether it's age, whether it's user role. Katie, I love what you said about, shop floor. A lot of times the shop floor was kind of seen as less than by a lot of management, whether they realized it or not. So getting everyone around the table to come in and have that mindset. Julia, when you were talking, it was I wanted to get up and run through a wall. It's so inspiring, right? Of it's all about the mindset and the attitude of there's so much opportunity in front of us. Everything is kind of in our hands as a team. Let's move forward together. So I think there's a huge play for it. Manufacturing, I think, historically has been pretty male dominated. I do think that's moving more towards the center. I think, again, on age, on a number of other classifications that's coming into play, shop floor operators are having more of a voice. So it's something that I've seen work really well. The best companies that I've been in, so I consulted for a little over 80 companies. The best companies were the ones where it was merit-based. Doesn't matter whose idea it is. Doesn't matter, if you have the Harvard MBA, whatever it is. If you can come in and you can add value and you can help move this forward, those companies win, and often by a large margin. So I think there's a huge opportunity here, and I think companies all over the world should be looking for that.
Yeah, I love that, Dan. I agree. I think that this vision of innovation, of creativity, of changing the way we manufacture, increasing technology requires a diversity of thought and a diversity of personnel involved. And so I hope personally that this includes more women in manufacturing. And I hope that this is not continuing to be a hurdle that we face in manufacturing.
Yeah. And I mean, we are all aware that different genders have different approaches to certain challenges and different perspectives. So I think this can also be reflected in how AI looks. And Katie mentioned a couple of times user experience. The greatest industrial designers and UX designers, I think, are female because they really look at it and sometimes yeah, exactly. I need the button right there. I mean, maybe most male engineers here disagree now with me and say no. But I think it's aesthetic, but also really it approaches me and it motivates me to try things instead of, oh my goodness, this is high tech, I don't even want to try. So giving the products and the interfaces some attraction so that we are really tempted to use it. But also to add on this, I don't think it's just about gender diversity. It's also about the age, as Dan says, because I think there is a generation which which is about to retire. And those have been in industrial automation for several decades. And when they retire, they take so much knowledge. And we all know that this knowledge is not saved in a structured way. So when we have a new engineer joining the company and he or she look at the data, they often have a hard time to find documentation of old projects. But how do they know what was back? Even if they find the right drawing, even if they find the quotation, they have no chance to figure out what was the customer requirement back then. So bringing all these information together in a structured way can be done by AI, so that companies save the knowledge from people who are about to retire, and it creates a platform which the next generation can pick up on. And I think in the past there was some ego, because people said, why would we share this information? This is my IP, this is my strength. But it's the time now to say, let's use big data, bring these things together for the cause of developing solutions faster.
And one thing I'll add just to the end of that I think is so important, Julia, you mentioned there's a kind of generation that's moving out and another generation coming in. We absolutely see that tribal knowledge all the time. And that's such an important point of how do you capture that? There is a lot of like territorialism. Hey, this is my space, don't touch it. Information sharing goes down. Business performance is not optimized as a result. Another thing that we've seen with this generation going into retirement, though, is it is leaving a vacuum where a lot of times they were kind of the gatekeepers and resistant to new technology. So now that they're coming in, we see this wide wave of new technology being adopted across a number of different sectors within manufacturing. So from a timing standpoint, I think that's where you see a lot of startups, now, not just with the AI movement, but with the demographic shifts, where you now have companies that, some people maybe wanted to implement something for the last 5 years or 10 years, but they weren't able to because of management or something. When they leave, now you're going to have thousands of companies starting to implement a lot of these digital transformation initiatives.
Yeah, and not just management, but also, new technology becoming available, because maybe, 2 or 3 years ago, you needed to reject a project because you didn't have this gripper, you didn't have this vision system, or it was maybe too expensive. And all of a sudden, these new features or these new hardware components become available, and you're actually able to do it, right? Or you have a customer, for example, who's been purchasing the same palletizer solution over and over and over again from you, same spec. And all of a sudden, you as the manufacturer, you realize there is a better way to do it. Okay, well, make the calculation, make the spec, make a quote, and say, look, this is how you've done this the last 2 years, but here's a better way, and we tell you why. And I think this is important to keep the focus on the technology and keep up with the latest innovations which are available for the customers.
I totally love this conversation, and think it also points back to retaining human intelligence, retaining the workforce knowledge, because that is key, right? We're not adding technology to change the entire process, right? We're integrating what has been done in the experiential knowledge so that we can train the new workforce, so that we can adapt to the new environment, right? But including that feedback of those people with expertise on the shop floor is really critical.
Yeah, I would add to that expertise is really important. Some of them will be less relevant as we shift to new software, new technologies, and maybe there are creative solutions we didn't think about and the AI can notice because it knows how to look at a much broader environment and data set and do better predictions than we do. But there is also something around the human and human interaction that will keep people engaged. The more we minimize people's jobs, the more we move into a risk where people would just treat their job as shifting, clicking a button or shifting a pen from one side to the other. And that risk of disengagement is where actual physical risks to the manufacturing environment, into production, also lie. So there is something around keeping people engaged, tapping into their intelligence by design, even not just because we can, but we actually should. So there is that component, not because of hallucinations only of AI, but also because that engagement, creating these cobots, right, Julia? So that kind of that environment is important. Dan, you mentioned very briefly on sort of the landscape changes around us, trends around us today, and you mentioned briefly geopolitics. Geopolitics have created a big movement, both in Europe and the US, where there is this retrieving back into the capacity of each geography, geopolitical environment to manufacture for itself, and sometimes even source for itself. That's not always the reality. But when you think about that trend, has that been a boost or has that been a challenge to innovation?
Yeah, I think it's been both. Yeah, I think it's been a challenge in that it's created uncertainty. So when you look at the innovation supply chain from capital to startups to the ecosystem, there's been uncertainty at, what's going to happen next if I had this whole strategy here, but that's going to be taken from me, whether it's due to tariffs, whether it's due to anything that's happening in the geopolitical space. What we've seen is a lot of people will pause, even for if it's a week or if it's a month or something like this, and they're just trying to wait stuff out. On the other hand, I think it's created a lot of opportunity. And oddly enough, I think it's been mostly opportunity of mindset, because now people are like, okay, it's been somewhat stable, but now people are like, if I had to, how do I make my supply chain twice as fast or twice as robust or more able to handle these risks, where if I have suppliers that I don't have access to, or their price doubles, or something happens, how can I be more self-sufficient? So a lot of companies, I would say they're not lazy by nature, but they're not every single day really grinding to really stack up what are the different things I need to do to prepare myself for either immense growth or to combat risk if it comes. And so we've seen a lot of companies now start to innovate because they don't know what's going to happen. And I think what you're going to see is a lot of these companies who are innovating, who are implementing vision systems, who are doing AI, who wouldn't have done it, but they're doing it now. They're going to see that geopolitically, I think things will come down. But as a result, they'll happen to be better off because they went through kind of this thing and said, okay, here's what the world could look like if something happened. I'm prepared for it, but I'm still able to go and improve my business through a number of different things in the supply chain. So I think it's both.
I would love to just add here, because in the material manufacturing space, this is one of the extreme challenges we face today. And you can't apply policy to change the reality of where critical materials come from, right? So companies have to make the decision to treat this like a short-term problem and just try to ride it out, or to make these tech advances. And so the coming years, I think, will really dictate how we are able to function as an industry, as a global industry, whether or not we move forward with these tech innovations, or we try to, hunker down and stick with what we've been doing. And so this is really such a key point in material manufacturing today. Thank you for bringing it up, Maya.
Yeah. I'm thinking, when I think materials and value chain, I think buyers clubs, especially as we shift towards sustainability and circularity. There is something around new types of materials, marking the materials, being able to track down to the source, to the, from the cradle, and then later on to the grave. And there is something around sharing information, sharing data, agreeing on policies, to your point, but also having free trade. And when that is challenged, our plans for sustainability ahead that have been reliant on an existing global exchange are now challenged as well. So there is a challenge there that obviously, yes, I hope we will be able to wade through. Some reactions have been to build in different markets for different markets and source in different markets for different markets, which is maybe an interim solution, and maybe that's where we're headed. So any thoughts about that?
I mean, I again, this is a second source is critical for material manufacturers, and it's very challenging, right? Introducing a second source of raw materials can include months, if not years, of qualification and process adjustments. And so this is where software, AI technology is really key in being able to have processes that are agile enough to bring in a second source of material. And I was at the Ceramics Expo a few weeks ago, and this is exactly what we were talking about. Will the materials manufacturing industry adopt these new technologies to be able to accommodate new sources and new ways of thinking, new ways of reusing materials. And that's what we need right now.
I love that. Well, lots of opportunities there, I guess, for innovation again. Then maybe the answer is actually both an obstacle and a boost injection. And hopefully we as innovators here in this panel are going to make it an innovation boost. And with that, I want to ask you all, even though you have your own startups, your own companies, I want to ask you for the maybe 1 to 3 companies that you feel are setting an example or at the edge of introducing smart manufacturing out there.
I can throw, if it's about throwing some names out there, for sure. So I would say, in picking up on the comment regarding the sensors and being a robotics person, but also being a machine vision person, 2 companies that I would highly recommend to look into, because I see that they are right about to scale. One is Cambrian Vision. It's a German-based company. They have a very nice application for cable handling with a robot. And, you know, this is a material which has a lot of difficulties. So in particular, when you have assembly where you need something that can look at the information and provide information to the robot, that's an interesting company. And the second one is Inbold. It's a startup from France, and they have an automated guided vision system, which helps also when you have an MMR, so a mobile manipulator, and a robot, and you have material which needs to be assembled or tested or whatever. It really follows the path of the motion of the product to adjust. And these 2 things are really cool sensor solutions, which I am following, and I can't wait to see them scale big.
Oh, I love, Julia, that both of the companies you mentioned are from Europe, and I think that might be a surprise for our audience. And by the way, the audience have asked, looking at the chat, for some innovations and examples and companies' names. Yeah, I love that. That encourages, I think, Europeans on the call that there is an opportunity there, and you can already see some innovation happening, and obviously an environment for innovation that enables that.
Yeah, I would say on the tech side of things, there's a number of companies that I classify them into kind of OEE virtualization. So Guidewheel is one. They're a startup. I think they recently just raised a good sum of money. They allow you to essentially attach these sensors and devices to machines to get real-time data. They are probably one of the closest plug-and-play IoT servicers that I've seen, where they can manage, are your machines running, yes or no? And if yes, are they running at rate, which is a critical distinction. And they do this by measuring voltage going to the machines, and they do a number of other cool things that's really great. But they make it non-technical and kind of do all the setup for you. So again, as a non-technical user with our manufacturing leaders, you can have the solution set up in a number of days. And then they have a really good software interface for that. Outside of that, this is maybe a little bit more for the technical users, but a lot of these tools like make.com, these are automation engines where you can create drag and drop workflows to do pretty much anything you can imagine to connect systems together. They're increasingly getting more integrated with hardware devices, and hardware devices are increasingly getting more, Wi-Fi enabled, so they work really nicely with these. So those would be the 2 that I would strongly recommend.
Thank you.
And so I would just second what is being said, but also add for material design. Citrine is doing a wonderful job of R&D, material development work. So that's not on the manufacturing end, but that's on the design. STR is another well-established modeling software that's used for designing furnaces. And then there's one company that I particularly love. It's called Path Robotics, and they are a spin out in Columbus doing AI for welding applications. And this is a wonderful image AI application where they're doing a manufacturing process quite well.
Great. So we have a good array of innovative solutions here, and we name names, and this is not paid for. This is actual content, actual shout outs from our panelists. So that's great. And now turning over to you as founders and CEOs of your own companies. So when you think about the advice, the few pieces of advice you can give to entrepreneurs in the space, in the manufacturing space, traditional heavy industry, and this point in time, what would that advice be?
Yeah, I would say there's several points of advice. I think the biggest one is don't be afraid to dream big and challenge the incumbents, because a lot of the incumbents that are in here are the big ERP systems, or the big consulting groups. At the end of the day, a lot of that stuff is antiquated and becoming more antiquated by the minute. And I've seen a lot of folks in my network who have wanted to do something in this space, and there's a little bit of trepidation of, can I really go after that? Can I really do it? Can I really introduce a technical innovation like that? And I've seen, if you build the right teams and you get the right people together, you can do pretty much anything you put your mind to from a hardware or software perspective, with what's available to you, with the processing power, with all of these different tools available. So for me, I would say for folks who have started a technology company or looking to it, take the first step, jump off the cliff and build the plane before you hit the ground. There's a lot of magic that can happen if you just try.
Love that.
Yeah, and to add on this is also look for new opportunities. I mean, there has been a path into automotive, into food, into material, in polymers. But what are new applications? Where is the world developing? Where do we see needs in the future? And there is a lot of medical devices, laboratory automation, even in the service robotics area, in education and research. There is so many applications where there is still room for innovation, for technology, for robotics, for software. So I would try to think outside the box and explore these areas, because once you start, and it takes much longer, of course, because you first need to develop, you first need to educate future users. But once you get there and you find this, it's actually very satisfying to have customers who start from nothing, and then they have their first robot and they are just getting so excited. And I had the opportunity to explore this, and I can only say it's amazing, because you directly develop the partnerships with these customers, with these people, and you built your own world without being compared to others.
Yeah.
I love that. I think for me, I would say, don't miss the opportunity to steer AI, right? We're in an area, a time of exponential AI capabilities, and it can do amazing things, but we need to make sure that we're incorporating that human interaction, that we're incorporating the expertise, and not designing software for the sake of designing tech, but for the sake of making people's lives better. And that will drive the adoption. That will drive, like Julia was saying, that will carry the technology in a way that's meaningful for us.
Yeah, I love how you're kind of solving. I mean, the title of this panel is Breakthrough Innovation, and the idea is to break through the current socio-technological regime that has been there for so many years. So thank you for your tips to our audience. I guess that I'd like to turn on to, I guess, two last questions. So one would be more on your mission. So when you think, and you touched on this a bit, Katie, sort of making people's life better, when you think about narrowing it down to the mission of your mission in smart manufacturing, what is that mission statement in one sentence? And then I'll turn to the last question.
Okay, yeah, I for us, it's making materials on time, increasing yield, allowing humans to innovate. That's our mission.
Julia?
Okay, so yeah, no, I mean, our mission is to provide solutions that actually work. And I know this is a bit offensive to all the startups which still do trial and error, but for me, like working with small and medium-sized companies, they don't have time to lose, and this is why we're on the mission to deliver the solutions that really work.
That's great.
Yeah, love that. And ours is to build that ecosystem, to build the software ecosystem that non-technical users can spin up and manage. Essentially what Shopify did to e-com, we want to do to the manufacturing space.
Fantastic. Love it. It's Shopify. And when you think of the audience here, we have diverse audience, different geographies, different sides of different parts of that ecosystem, Dan. What is the takeaway you'd like them to leave this panel with?
Yeah, around the ecosystem. I would say every company has the opportunity to make significant advances starting today. It's not as big of a black box as I think people perceive it to be. I think the difference a month or a year make when companies come in and they say, hey, we really want to commit to this initiative. We want to get better. We want to measure things, because what gets measured gets managed. We want to measure things. We want to improve the culture. We want to drive to be better and not just okay with status quo. And there are tools available right now that we can implement quickly, easily, without 4-year contracts, not knowing if it's going to work. And there are partners who are looking for companies like us that want to help us move the needle. So for me, it would be go out and find these folks, get started today. It's very easy to say, oh, this is something I'll do. I have people who are still wanting to do big data, and that's 7 years ago, right? And they still haven't done anything. So it's available today. Go out and get it.
Yeah, and to add to this also, I mean, don't be discouraged when something is not moving in your direction. There will always be new things. There will be new regulations. There will be new competitors, which will make you rethink what you're working on. But just as Dan said, even though, there is somebody, it doesn't mean that they will make the breakthrough. So focus on what you believe in, because sometimes even a change can lead to new opportunities. And here I'm referring, for example, to safety standards. When we look at humanoid robots, there is a huge hype around humanoids and AI. But we recently see pictures where, these robots are being punched, or they are punching, or they are stepping on kids' feet. So there are no safety regulations around it. So safety actually, or regulations, means, okay, our area of performance is limited. But what does it mean when we actually reduce the environment, or when we put some rules into place? That opens the opportunity to say, what is the use case and how can we make it work, instead of just saying it can be universal and it can do everything. So I'm really excited about all these things which are about to come and how we navigate through this. And I can only encourage everybody, stay focused on what you're doing and use also the challenges as opportunities, because they are there.
I agree. I love this point of start now. It's happening now. The capabilities are there now. And there's space for many people. There's a lot of technology that is needed now. There are many different use cases that are required now. And we will all creating opportunities in particular spaces will drive the industry forward. And so I love this. Start now and do what you're passionate about, and we will transform the industries together.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, everyone. I love how we traveled from the problem statement, from material space to the ecosystem of software and robotics. And then we shifted to, what are the few opportunities, even including diversity there, and the opportunities for workforce. And then talking a bit about specific innovations you have been excited about. What is it that you recommend companies not to do if they want to introduce the next level of smart manufacturing into their floors, and how to do it wisely? And some of your thoughts on how should entrepreneur approach problem solving in your domain that is extremely difficult to enter in many ways, and how encouraging you're all right now when you're trying to have the audience leave this room with this spirit of innovation, partner, work together, don't compete. There is space for everyone. So much needs to get done, and stay faithful to your mission statement. Thank you so much, everyone. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.